Welcome to the Church Safety and Security broadcast with the Church Safety Guys, sponsored by Checker. Background screens for your faith or volunteer organization. The Church Safety Guys is a nonprofit organization. Our mission is to inspire, influence, and impact church safety and security teams. We are protectors, guardians, ambassadors, and shepherds. We are about all things church safety and security, which starts with a ministry mindset and a servant's heart. Join us for the next hour as the Church Safety Guys unpack safety, security, leadership, and ministry operations with your hosts, James McGarvey and Mike Scully. This broadcast is also available on social media, YouTube, your favorite podcast platforms, and on the all-new Church Security app.
Well, hello. Welcome to the Church Safety and Security broadcast with the Church Safety Guys. I am James, and I am joined by my co-host, Mike Scully. How are you doing, Mike?
Good. A busy Mother's Day, of course. It's not like there's nothing going on in the world of church safety this weekend.
Nothing at all, right?
Nothing.
And I say that tongue in cheek for sure. And we've had quite an interesting day. I was speaking to our guest, and I just got done with my third church service for the day, and thankfully it was quiet. You know, we had a fantastic group of folks that were serving with me today, and it was a blessing that we were quiet. And I haven't really heard of any churches that were impacted by the news this week, and working through some of that. But I heard a lot of churches being prepared and ready to handle certain things, and it was definitely, that was good to know that we could help folks and kind of look at some of that content and get it out there for people.
What's really interesting is I almost feel there was, obviously the story takes a life of its own and over time in any story. And it was good that there was information getting out there. I mean, you and I talked, you posted a video about it. I think what I see happening, though, is I feel like as everybody starts getting, hey, this is real. Let's be talking about this. I feel almost as if within our echo chambers of the world of church safety and security, different communities, all things like that, I feel like the amplification of the original chatter actually eclipsed the original chatter. In other words, it almost became an echo chamber, and the echo became louder than the original, and to some degree. So it kind of overshadowed the instigators who were trying to call for these protests. And we don't know. There still could be stories coming out of places that were there. I posted a couple of times today about our Catholic brothers and sisters who probably are not very active in the church safety and security front. Having been raised in that church and knowing a lot of people there, they just don't have safety and security teams. And so it's an opportunity area, but I know some of those original instigating threats were focused in that direction, but there were also others that brought it into evangelical churches as well. So I felt like, you know what, it was a good day. It was a good teachable moment for the teams to kind of say, hey, here's some intel. It shouldn't really change how you do your job. It should just give you a piece of information that says, okay, the type of incident that you may be dealing with today is this.
Sure.
All it does is foreshadow it. It really doesn't change the approach.
For sure. I had a good friend of mine, and he's actually the son of one of the folks that I serve with, and he happened to be in Columbus. He lives on the East Coast, but he wanted to surprise his mom for Mother's Day. So he decided to drive out to Ohio and kind of showed up. And he reached out to me this morning, and he said, look, he said, I'm sure you've heard of this. And he works for the FBI. But he reached out to me. He's like, I'm sure you heard about this situation and the protests and everything else. And he said, I'm just going to let you know that I can't talk about it, but this is very serious. And, you know, the FBI is taking it very serious. And by the way, I'll be in your congregation today. So he's like, if you need anything, bro, I've got your back. And I'm like, you know what? I really appreciate that. I'm like, that, that's a blessing, because he's the type of individual that, he would, in a heartbeat, he would say, what can I do to help you? And that's the type of, certainly the resource that you want randomly showing up. Maybe it wasn't random. Maybe it was a God thing for us.
Perhaps.
But
Even our pastor addressed it head on. Not that we had protesters, but I felt it was
sure,
really good in that they didn't shy away from it. They said, you know what,
mine did
this
too.
happened. This is gonna,
Yep,
but you know what? Here's how we're going to deal with it if we ever encounter it. Is
yeah,
we're going to love our neighbor. We're going to love our enemy. We're going to give them coffee. We're going to give them water. We're going to sit there and treat them better than they treat us. Now,
for sure.
obviously, at the end of the day, there's a line that can be crossed. And if that line is crossed, then you deal with it accordingly. But in all
Right,
honesty, I mean, we pray for those who may treat us badly. And I think that's the difference through today is that there's a big spirit of fear. You talked about it in your video, and I think it's true. I think some people let that spirit of fear get the better of them and get too ginned up in this. Again, it's the idea is that you got to mentally prepare, yes, but it's not like it's not like you're in the gym and you're like, okay, and you're getting all worked up, and I'm gonna lift this huge set of weights. You don't have to
sure.
build that sort of energy up. You have to think through it and say, okay, I've prepared for this. This is my job. This is what I
Right,
do. If we encounter this, this is what I do. And mentally, you just kind of go, okay. If you're new to it, maybe you go down that path. But if you're not, you draw those lines in the sand in your mind, and you know, okay, if that line is crossed, this is how I will respond. And you prepare in that sense. So I think there's a difference between the excitement or the bubbled up, oh my gosh, this is happening, versus calm, collected. Again, foreshadowing, we had kind of a forethought as to what type of incident we might get to encounter today. But
right.
the vast majority of us, praise God, did not.
Well, and I think, to go back to your point real quickly, I think you hit the nail right on the head. It's like, we train for this type of disruption. You have to. And so when you start realizing it, the more comfortable you are with acknowledging it, the less nervous you are.
Right.
And that gives you that experience of saying, look, nothing happened, but talk through and really do kind of like a tabletop and say, okay, if this were to happen, how would we handle this?
Right.
And oftentimes nervousness comes with fear, and we've talked about that before, where communication, and again, if you missed it, I did a short video this morning, but communication is great, community is great, but oftentimes it builds that anticipation and that fear, and fear is really an enemy to wisdom, and it's an enemy to God's wisdom, because then we're not trusting and having faith that He's going to take care of what's going on in that situation. So I think it was a good, for the sake, and I don't think we're anywhere done with this
Nope.
this type of protest, this type of situation against places of worship. But at the same time, I think it was a good wake up for Christians and different churches to say, this is a topic that we're going to have to look at more often, and
Yep.
we're going to have to be better prepared for it. So,
Well, and I had an exchange. I passed some information to a Catholic organization that had caught wind of this, and that's not really their lane. They've never really gotten involved in safety and security, and so it was a
sure,
matter of kind of saying, "Hey, we're out here, we're doing this for churches, so we have resources." So this is
right,
not new to those of us, obviously, in the evangelical side. There's different denominations that this may be newer to. And so the news of this that's circulating this week, I know for a fact there's a lot of new followers and new folks coming out of the woodwork and saying, wow, I didn't necessarily picture my church as being a target of protest.
For
So
sure.
to some degree, I sit there and say, maybe you're sleeping. In the other, and I say that kind of nicely, but in the other way is
Right.
I also sit there and say, if your church isn't worthy of protest, you're probably not at church.
Well, and that's just a harsh, sharp truth, but it is truth, and I'm very grateful. Our senior pastor today was preaching, and he commented on the whole situation before everybody left for the day, and he said basically, he took that approach you mentioned and said, you know what, let's pray. Let's pray for the Supreme Court right now. Let's pray for the folks that are moved to do evil, and and just pray that God will step in and take care of it, and that maybe those individuals through it will come to a saving knowledge of Him. So
Amen.
from that standpoint, there's two approaches you can take. You can ignore it, or you can say, let's do our best to share the love of Christ with this person, and I think the latter is usually a better path to take. But so anyhow, if this is the first time that you've joined us, if you haven't joined us in a while, or you've joined us before, thanks for hanging out with us. We have plenty of resources at our website, which is churchsafetyguys.com, and we have in the App Store and Google Play, and also the iOS Apple Store, we have our church security app, which you can download, and it has many free resources for your church, and you're welcome to access that free and register free. And oftentimes we can send out alerts and different content through that to you and your church. But there's some great resources there and on our website. And for those of you watching this at a later time, if you see the like and subscribe button, feel free to click that. And then when we upload content, you can be notified of that as soon as possible. So on this broadcast, we actually had the opportunity to bring an author in, and it's a little bit, I think this is a little bit different from the standpoint for us, from the standpoint that oftentimes we'll bring in folks that are directly related to church security, church safety, that sort of thing. And this gentleman is related to church safety, but at the same time, I happened to come across one of his books, and I would say, some people would say happened, maybe it was providential, I'm not sure, but I sat down and I read the book, and it was just a really great, fantastic book. And so that kind of prompted me to go down the rabbit trail of reaching out to him and seeing if maybe he would grace us with his with his presence on our show. So I will bring Jason Sautel in here. So again, Jason, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Hey, James. Hey, Mike. Thanks for having me, man. And I'm looking around for the guy you just talked about. Was that me that you were? No, I'm just joking. Thank you so much, man. It's such a blessing for me to be here too.
Welcome.
Well, I appreciate it. So for those of you at home, I've got my copy right here, but I came across, I guess there was an ad on Facebook, and it was for this book called The Rescuer. And for those of you that remember, my background, before I went into church safety, my background was fire and EMS. And so it just kind of caught my attention, and I'll read the byline and maybe you'll understand. So it says, one firefighter's story of courage, darkness, and the relentless love that saved him. And so I was like, you know what? This sounds really intriguing to me. And the rest of the story was, I picked up a copy, and I think I read it in about 24 hours. Nice. And my family came to me and said, where did your dad go? Why is he reading this book? But again, I was very much blessed by it, and we can certainly talk about your purpose in writing that. But if you could, Jason, just kind of walk us down, for those that don't know, if they're watching this at a later time, they're probably going to guess that you were a firefighter from your background, but give us that, or from the picture in the background. Sorry.
Right.
But give us that background, if you would.
Well, at the age of 18, I actually started with a smaller county fire department out here in California. And just before we get going, just because I'm from California, I'm not California. Okay, I want to clear that, especially with everything that's going on right now. I walked into kind of the hornet's nest today with everything that's going on with church safety stuff. But with that being said, at the age of 18, I became a firefighter with the California Department of Forestry at the time, working in a county setting. And, I just wanted to work in a bigger city and use my skills a little more. And don't get me wrong, no matter where you work, fires burn just as hot, medicals are there, car accidents happen. They're all horrific and you don't want them to happen. But if you're blessed with the skill to be able to help people out, it's kind of cool to go out and use that skill. So I started applying with the big cities, and Oakland, California gave me a call back. And what I jokingly say is I went up, sat through the interview, told them all the right fibs, and they hired me. So that was back in 1993 is when I first started. And then I finished out my career in 2015, officially responding to calls because I had an injury where I injured my hip and my back. And after a few surgeries, I couldn't do the job anymore. So now I do some teaching, preaching, and just talking about it.
Awesome. Well, the preaching is kind of what intrigued me. And in the book, The Rescuer, you kind of go through your story, but you also kind of explain how God reached out to you in the middle of dealing with the fire service and dealing with life, and kind of expound on that for us a little bit.
Well, when I was listening to your guys' conversation at the start there, which was just really good, and the sound advice and scriptural backed advice you everyone was awesome. And it kind of made me think that what you were saying with the stuff that's going on today and the protests and how to reach those people, how we should deal with them. Well, I also see it the same thing is, how can we learn from this? How can we grow from this? How can we, become more Christ-like when we're dealing with people who are protesting? Because as a firefighter, I've dealt with that before. I've actually fought fire in the middle of a riot, if you will. And as much as I wanted to respond one way, it was better to respond the other way, right? Which we all get. So with that being said, one of the reasons that I wrote it was because I wanted to use the stories that God gave me to be able to encourage other people. First off, I'm going to encourage you to go to your local church. I'm not, teaching online, if you will, or teaching through my book. I'm motivating. I'm giving you testimony, right? And showing you the good things that God did in my life through the things he let me experience. And I also didn't want to just write a hardcore firefighting book, because let's be honest, being at the busiest firehouse in West Oakland, California, where you go out the door thousands of times per year on just the shootings, the stabbings, the sad stuff, the fires, I also wanted to show the emotional side and about how it was when I was walking in the darkness and how bad I needed Jesus without recognizing it, but knowing I needed him eventually because some certain Christians came in my life. So to wrap it all up without going too far into the rambling phase of it, sure. I just wanted people to see what it was like when I walked in the darkness, how empty I was, how horrible it was, and how things turned around when I put my faith in Christ Jesus. But truthfully, I wanted to do it in a realistic testimony way without being too preachy, if you will.
And I mean, you honestly, you nailed it. I mean, you knocked it out of the park with that, because I walked away even reading it and just being very much encouraged, because I know putting that together from a book standpoint is a skill. It's an art to be able to walk that fine line of being biblical and having a biblical emphasis, but at the same time not being really preachy and just saying, look, this is my experience, but using that experience to really to encourage others and push them to have a better relationship with Christ and go down that road. So oftentimes we will bring folks in, and part of our mission is to encourage leadership and build leadership up as well. And I mean, this is a great, I think this is a great resource to be able to encourage folks and say, look, here's an individual that literally went through hell, and God reached out and grabbed him and used him and is using him today. And, if God can do that encouragingly, then, God can use any of us and all of us. And I really got that. I got that vibe from reading it.
Oh, that's great. And I get it. What I love is every time someone reaches out to me, what they get out of it,
Sure.
and because instead of, again, like I said, just telling the story, I wanted to show the emotions of what it's like to fight a fire, what it's like to kick in the door and hit 1,000-degree heat in the 1,000-degree heat hits you in the face. And then you go through and you're trying to do everything you can to rescue people, but you fail. And I wanted people to see that things are not their fault, that this was God's will. And as horrible as I thought it was, God's going to use all things for his glory. And so I grew through those experiences, just like people will read through it. And what I hope they see a lot of times is what selflessly responding to others truly looks like, that we show up without judging and just treat. Now, don't get me wrong. We keep ourselves safe. People are like, oh, well, so you're not worried about your safety. Well, yeah, we're always, making sure we're safe. We're in safe situations, and there's been a time or two where I've asked a really nice young man, hey, would you mind just taking the magazine out of that AK-47 and sliding it under the bed for a few minutes until we're done with this medical response that we're on, so there's major, things that happen that people can draw from. But it's just so awesome to see how each person gets something different out of it. And then when I get the email response, or even just talking to you guys, it's just such a blessing on so many levels, because I get to see how God's using it in people's lives.
For sure. I think one of the key points of the book I just want to jump into real quick, and then I'll toss it over to Mike.
Yeah.
We encourage, and if folks at home, if you've listened to our broadcast as long as we've been doing this, we always encourage and we always look at church safety as an actual ministry. Like, you can protect, you can serve, you can be safe at your church, but at the end of the day, you have to support the mission of the church. You have to have the doors open in the community and serving the community, and really, again, also sharing the light of and love of Christ in the community. And so we worked with churches for a long time, but we still see churches all the time that are like, no, we're going to close the doors. We're going to protect our folks. And, when the service starts, that's it. You don't come in, we don't reach out. It's a very closed situation. And so one of the illustrations in your book, you mention, and this is the one that really hit me hard, was when you were searching, you went to the church, and they actually, in California, they turned you away because of how you were dressed and how you looked. And when I was reading that, I was blown away, because that really reached out to me and said, as believers, how are we setting that example? How are we reaching out to folks that maybe are searching, but maybe they get frustrated because we don't think they meet that church criteria that they should in our minds. Right. And it meant a lot to me that you put that in there. It might not, it might seem kind of weird to some people, but at the same time, growing up in a Christian home, and being in church a good portion of my life, that screamed volumes to me.
Right. And I appreciate you bringing that up, because, that's a story that a lot of people bring up. And yes, it is a true story. I just had gone off duty. I was just in a real bad spot because, my childhood was really rough growing up. So I had all the demons of my past from that, plus all the evil that was attaching itself to me from responding to all the sad situations I was. And I was finally in a place where I just wanted something more. And I just thought, if I go to that church, maybe in there someone will actually give me that hug I need and help me out. I want some of that goodness they have. And, I live out in California and I grew up as a surfer, and I showed up in my best pair of surf clothes. And unfortunately, it was a very legalistic, strict, old school church. And they told me I couldn't come in dressed the way I was. And what cut me so deep was I grew up my whole life being told I wasn't good enough, growing up under a system of abuse with no mom, thing like that, and a dad who just didn't want to be a dad to me. And it just really, it hurt so bad. And there's a reason I put it in there was I didn't want to make people mad. And I don't want people to think all Christians are like that, because I didn't base my whole view on Christians based on those two guys. And if I did, it would be a horrible way to look at it. But what I wanted Christians to do is like hold that up as a mirror and say, is there anything I'm doing to drive a non-believer away from the church? And I even do it to myself. I hold a mirror up to myself and say, is there anything I'm doing from the opposite side that may be driving a non-believer from church? Because we want them to come to church. That's it. If they're coming to church, that's a good thing, and let's not push them out while obviously standing firm in our faith. But standing firm in our faith doesn't mean coming from a legalistic, hardcore point to someone, especially when they have no idea what our faith is all about.
Right.
For sure.
Yeah.
Mike, did you want to jump in and?
Yeah, I think picking up off of that, it's a great point, Jason and James bringing it up. I think so often people looking at it, and perhaps whether it's the protesters or the media or whatever, looking at that is churches are a hospital for sinners. They're not a country club for saints. And the difference is we have to keep reminding ourselves that. I feel like there's times where you can have a person's name on the door instead of something church. It ends up, and there's a lot of folks that get really caught up in a specific named preacher. And I'm not saying that they can't be messengers, but they can very easily go astray as well.
Oh yeah.
And I think that's the challenge at times is what I really like about it. And I didn't have a chance to read the full book, but I'm encouraged and definitely want to. I think it is really what I like about the whole idea is really the metaphor and of hearing the different bits about your story and how James relays it, is really the metaphor of really that running into battle, that running into a fire or running to a call. And so not equating, of course, anything in church safety as something like you would do on that first responder, but in a way, as immediate responders, there's things we encounter in a church that we hand off. We talked a little bit before the show about how do we best receive those first responders when they're coming on scene. So in a way, we're suiting up as church safety people as well. We're putting on the full armor of God. Okay, maybe we're not putting on the heat suit and everything else and trying to deal with that piece, but we're putting on our own things to try to get ready for what we're doing for the day. So I think that's just important. And it's really good.
I love that. And just to kind of speak into a little bit about some of the protests that are going on, by no means does that mean anyone's allowed to come in and disrupt and be there and cause disturbances. But by all means, the way I look at it is if someone's outside and they're so angry and they attribute me to something that I'm really not, I might be the only person that they could see as a Christian that responded differently. And when we respond to a culture that has no idea what we're about, because we're ambassadors of heaven in a foreign land, right? And so when we're in this foreign land and they're not, their eyes are shut to our beliefs, they're going to respond away. So I look at times like this as what a great way to respond and be obedient to love. But just like in the fire service, just because I love you and I'm going to treat you, I'm not going to take a punch in the face from you either, or be injured or not go home. I'm also going to keep myself safe. And that's why I really appreciate what you guys do, and also the aspect that you took when talking about it.
Yeah, it's big. I think there's so often that we can, and I think the bit you talked about, maybe we'll go into the second half, but I really feel that spiritual battle that we all face. Whether it's in any career that we have or in any choices we have, or whether it's from childhood or in different circumstances, and I posted about this today, is those storms may rage around you from time to time. I don't think they ever go away. They just get further away. And so the difference is they come back. But while the storms are raging, we have to keep reminding ourselves is Jesus is in the boat with us.
Right.
And now he may be sleeping, okay, but at the same point, there's a point Jesus is in the boat. We have to keep that at top of mind.
Right. And one of the ways that I explain it with, so many people that get a hold of me, especially, through podcasting and also through my Facebook page, and they ask questions about, so when you became a Christian, everything got all better, right? I'm like, no, but there's eternity is locked in. I have hope. I now have clarity on why everything bad around me is happening. And one thing I bring to them is, I can't find one Bible verse throughout the Holy Scriptures that says my life is going to be comfortable as a Christian. It actually says the exact opposite. But with that being said, the Bible also shows us how we're supposed to obediently respond to the chaos and the darkness that we're in. Because let's be honest, as an Oakland fireman, dealing with evil day in and day out and how it manifested in different ways and in rapes, murders, stabs, killings, fires, and all that, is I would just show up and just love on the people that were there and then realize it wasn't my fault, And so I think as followers of Christ, and especially, in the safety side of things, because that's what the fire department was we have to realize it's going to be chaotic, but it's our response that has to be correct. And the level of response needs to be correct. And I'm not saying whether it's a huge or a small, but for the situation, we got to engage the emergencies that are in front of us in the way that God wants us to.
Right.
For sure.
Well
We need to go ahead and take a quick break, but when we come back, I definitely want to dive into what you just said a little bit more, because I think that's a gold nugget for sure. So we'll take a quick break. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
With over 50 years of experience with religious and nonprofit organizations, Thomas Alexander Insurance and Associates understands that your congregation is different from traditional business. We're here to fulfill your needs, coming to you while creating a personal plan for your budget and size. From your local community to around the globe, we are advocates for you. Thomas Alexander Insurance and Associates, your partner in service.
We all deal with stress on a daily basis. When not properly managed, we can face burnout, mental, physical, and spiritual burnout. It can be detrimental to serving in church safety and security, as well as other ministries, and affect all areas of life. Coming Back brings biblical guidance for such a dilemma. In the book Coming Back, best-selling author James McGarvey takes a biblical-based approach to address and prevent ministry burnout. As you read Coming Back, you will easily relate to James's shared experiences, be inspired by Scripture, and grow through the practical and applicable instruction found in this much-needed book. This encouraging read will affect you and your team in a positive way to continue the path of ministry with an energized and encouraged spirit. Through biblical and practical knowledge and experience, James shows that it is all about coming back to focus on what matters, coming back to the cross.
At Centurion Bible College, we're authentic about relationships, we're passionate on training, we're unapologetically biblical. And as the first college in the United States to design an associate's program in church safety and security, we're innovative. Explore Centurion Bible College and you'll find the tools to be better prepared to support your community and the mission of your church, the culture to help you engage with the people you serve with, and the environment to foster learning and leadership. Discover Centurion Bible College today. Enhance and develop the skills to engage and connect with your community when they need you the most. Be intentional in your community with a ministry mindset, understand concepts of safety and security, and make a difference today. For more information or to enroll, visit centurionbc.org or churchsafetyguys.com.
The Church Safety Guys help church and place of worship safety and security teams all over North America. through our broadcasts, online communities, conferences, trainings, resources, and the all-new Church Security app. Download it today. Help us continue to reach churches by supporting our sponsors, purchasing our resources, and consider becoming a ministry partner by making a monthly or one-time donation. Remember to like, subscribe, and share this broadcast with your team. And now, back to the broadcast.
All right, and we are back, and we have author and retired firefighter Jason Sautel with us. So again, Jason, thank you so much for joining us. We definitely appreciate your time. And I want to jump back into the discussion and the comment that you made before the break, which was kind of being aware and understanding or having a knowledge of how we respond to stuff, and from a safety team, how to interact with first responders and best interact with firefighters and those folks from a church perspective. So if you could kind of expand on that just a little bit for us.
Well, taking it from a practical way of looking at it is, I won't claim to be a professional, but responding to, tens of thousands of emergency medical calls and fires, I have picked up a thing or two over the years. And one of the biggest things that I've always appreciated, especially when I stepped up into the role of lieutenant and I was the guy kind of in charge on the scene, was a point of contact. And that point of contact also knowing how to control their group, meaning like if you're at a church, if there's something going on, well, if it's a medical emergency, let's be honest, if a pastor was to relate to everyone, hey, just sit quiet and pray quietly while the firefighters and the paramedics come in. And then, we respect the service. And if we can safely whisk someone out right away, we will, but if we need to stay there and do CPR, you don't want loud noise and people jumping up and everything. So I just love that point of contact is already trained up, and they're trained up with the staff on how to handle different types of emergencies, and again, I'm just coming from a fire department emergency medical standpoint.
And that's big, Jason. I think we talk about that a lot, Jason, James and I, and we're talking about incident command structure and how assigning members of your team to receive first responders. So right. In any incident where fire, EMS, or police are called, somebody's going out to that door, not because they don't know how to get there, but in reality, like the church that I recently helped with, there were two entrances, but both were pretty much on highway access roads. So if at the end of the day they came flying by and they missed that exit, their response time went from 5 minutes to 9 minutes. Right. And so the difference is we recognize the fact that under high speed with others, trying not to cause an accident, you may miss the entrance in that sense. So we always try to look at it from that perspective. But the other is a point of contact, not just for the EMS or first responders, but we have a point of contact for the incident itself. Who's first on scene for that incident, truly, and what needs to be handled. Do we need to create space? Is it something big enough that, okay, now our video team is going to put a slide up on screen? Is it something that may escalate into an evacuation? Is it because who knows? It could have been something where maybe there was smoke, maybe there was fumes of some sort. Maybe the fog machine got out of control again. Those sorts of things, but you never know.
Well, and to go in that, and I don't want to get into every fire department's SOPs or how it should be done, because I know everyone's limited with resources and different things. But what we would do is in our districts, we knew our districts because Oakland's a big city, very dense, a lot of fires, a lot of emergencies, a lot of things happening. But we added within them things called target hazards, which churches were within those. So we would actually not do an inspection, a fire inspection, but we would do a quick walkthrough with them. So we had general knowledge before we pulled up, because be honest with you, if it's on fire, we're pretty much not listening to anyone except help us get people out, because we have tactical knowledge that people don't have. Like, why'd you put your hose here instead of put it there? That doesn't make sense. And we all hear that all the time. But what I highly advise is for churches, reach out to their local fire departments and have them come to a walkthrough so we can get the layout. We can hear, it's nice to know, well, is there 500 people here or 50? Is there 3,000 or 10? It's really, that's really good knowledge to have in the target hazards. And so I just appreciate your guys' way of handling that, what you guys do with your programs.
It's interesting to me, and I think I was asked a few years ago to evaluate our evacuation points for for fires and different things like that. And I started studying what we had, and I realized that how we had people evacuating the building was in direct line of where the first engines would roll up with, we always get an engine in a ladder truck because we're 2 stories. And I just had to start laughing. And, the person that I was with was like, because we were in kind of a group having this meeting, and I looked at it and I'm like chuckling, and everybody's like, what's wrong with McGarvey? Why is he laughing? And I said, it's hilarious.
Right.
And like, what? And I said, well, you're sending 2 and 3 year olds, you're sending the toddler class directly across the driveway to a point where you're crossing in front of emergency vehicles coming into our church campus. And so it was really kind of just a wake up point where we're like, okay, wait a second, let's stop. Think about how they're going to access the building. We don't want to slow them down. We don't want to make it hard for them. So what can we do as a church to make this a smoother process?
And that's what works out so well, is talking to your first due firehouse and working that out ahead of time. Because like I say, things can change, at any moment, depending on the type of emergency. But to have that basic knowledge and to have your first responders kind of walk you through that, where you say, hey, this is where we want everyone to meet up. This is our meetup point. We'll come to find out that meetup point is right where we're going to be dropping a 5-inch line from the hydrant in there to whack someone. We could kill them. Let's keep it real. So that's solid, wisdom that you're throwing out there that is really important to kind of think a little deeper, because when we pull up, there's just so much on our minds. And I'll be honest, most people don't realize one of them is not running over people, getting there safely, as that's a huge thing for us, because we don't want anyone to get injured by any means while we're going there. So it really helps out if you guys do that stuff ahead of time.
For sure. And one of the other things I'll throw it over to Mike to go back to your point, Mike, of just being aware and knowing your building and the outlay of it. We've said this, I don't know how many times on the broadcast, number, letter, label your doors. Our church has 26 doors, and we went to labeling each door basically a letter. So we can say, hey, come to, when we call 911, we'll say, come to this door A or door K. And they understand and they know our local firehouse has come out. They've walked it with us, and they know how that letter system runs. And we've had mutual aid units responding where that information was passed on to them.
Yes. And
that just allowed them to get there that much quicker. And because in one situation, we had a gal go unresponsive, and we received mutual aid from a nearby township. And when the battalion chief walked up on the scene, I asked him, I said, was this helpful? And did this help? And he was like, yeah, absolutely. Because he said it popped up. I drove around the building, and I knew that I would have someone meeting me here to guide me into where this incident was. So it's good stuff.
No, I appreciate that too. From the fire standpoint, it's good, because having any knowledge of a building layout or any knowledge of how things are going to operate before you get there, because let's be honest, 911 systems or 911 jobs, what's our job is to respond to, we don't know what, we always say we're toolboxes for human tragedies. If the world's having a good day, we're having a good day. If something bad's happened, we're walking into the unknown. So having a little bit of knowledge ahead of time is so solid. So I appreciate that aspect of it.
Along that line, it's important. I've actually built out emergency evacuation mapping, so primary and secondary egress routes for each location in the building. So multiple student classrooms, multiple ministry spaces, a kitchen, etc. All of those spots. Not only does it alert them to where is their closest pull, so that they can actually pull the fire alarm if they ran into or encountered it. Where's their closest AED? Where's their closest fire extinguisher, on the basis of which room they're at, and then how to get out of there. But what's important is I package all that together, put it into a single PDF, and ship that over to the local PD and FD, and said, hey, this is our layout. These are little mini blueprints, but this is what we're doing in the event that we have to evacuate. This is what they have. And so it just gives an additional piece of playbook. And it's not like they're not necessarily downloading that the day of an incident, but it can help. And as they're looking at the structure, looking at response, and choosing who and how to send in that response, those blueprints can certainly aid in that arrival even more.
Right. And having that connection with them so good, because I'll be honest with you, when we have points of contact like you that are helping train up those also, so you're telling your people, we're telling our people, okay, it's great. And I'll give an example of this where one of my worst responses I'd ever been on, and it's not a church response, but we could kind of take it along into that realm, was I was working overtime at a firehouse in downtown Oakland near the convention center, and we ran a cardiac arrest at the convention for cardiologists. Okay, you want to talk about fiasco, because where I was going to go with this is, as you know, we want to train up our lay responders to a point to do good, but sometimes once the responders get there, if there's a proper handoff, their doing good can become a hindrance, so like a cardiologist was telling us how to do CPR, this, that, and the other, and this is just a funny story off the side. I looked over the paramedic, I said, go get me a backboard. And this cardiologist yells at me, he doesn't need a backboard. He's not a trauma patient. So I said, put my hand on the doctor. I said, yes, sir. I said, hey, doc, in the fourth compartment back on my ladder truck, there's a circ saw. Could you go grab for me? Because I need to cut out the floor here, because I need a hard place to do CPR as we're going to the ambulance. Okay. Yeah, he called back, reported to a chief. He wasn't overly happy with the way I responded. But where I'm going with that is, what I appreciate about what you're doing is from what I'm hearing, you're training up everyone into what their roles, responsibilities are. So we have a good pass off so the pros can do their job. Yeah. But I want anyone who's listening to this to understand, if you're a lay responder, you're a pro also until we get there, so it's good to have that handoff area.
We had a situation, and Mike's heard this story before, but we had a situation a few years ago where a gentleman collapsed on me and went unresponsive at our evening church service, and I laid him down and started doing CPR on him because he stopped breathing. And as I was doing compressions, I'm barking out orders to people to grab the AED, grab our trauma bag and that sort of thing. And his wife actually came up behind me and started grabbing my shoulders and screaming at me, like, do something at the top of her voice. And I'm like trying to do a compression, and I can't do a compression because she's like pulling me
right
back. But thankfully, what was amazing about the situation was we had there was actually an engine with a paramedic on it at the intersection in front of our church building. And when the call came out, they were like, hey, we're right in front of this church. Let's take this. Right. So they called and said, hey, we're responding. We're right here. And we're off on the scene. And so we literally had paramedics there within probably 2 minutes of him.
Wow. What a blessing.
And so they came in and they're like, okay, what's going on? And he started coming around, and then he got combative, and he was like, look, I don't want to go to the hospital. I'm done. And I kind of turned around to one of the firefighters, actually the medic, and I said, you need to take him to the hospital. He stopped breathing. But otherwise, if I hadn't had that piece of communication to him, then he would have, like, the guy would have been like, no, I'm good. I'm fine. Well, what was crazy is later I asked him, after he went to the hospital, got checked out, afterwards, I asked him, I said, what do you remember about that whole situation? And I said, do you remember fighting with me to not want to go to the hospital? And he said, no. He said, I remember waking up in the back of the ambulance on the way to the hospital. But it was amazing to me because, again, it was a providential thing. God worked it out. And that family, that couple is one of my dearest friends now, because, they came back and said, hey, thank you so much for having a team of folks that could respond, to the situation when we didn't know. But the handoff, the working with local, the local firefighters, medics, I mean, it was amazing. Like, I stepped back, and we encourage churches to critique calls afterwards as well, and say, okay, what could we have done different? Could we have done this better? And often, because oftentimes you can, as you know, and this particular case, we stepped back and we said, you know what, everything was perfect. Yeah. We couldn't have asked for a better outcome or a better response or anything.
Well, no, you nailed it, because that's even something for my book that I kind of have people pull out of is, let's be honest, the majority of the fires I went to didn't take an ounce of courage. And people initially they did, because when you're a brand new firefighter and you're pulling up to a burning building, like, oh my gosh, this is scary. But then once you get some knowledge under you, you're like, all right, that was a room and contents. Sure, it was hot. Sure, it was this. But it's not like we pulled up to that just raging warehouse or the third floor fire where it's in a 1910 building and people are hanging out of the windows. Those fires take courage to go hit head on. Those fires are where true learning, even if you got 25 years in at a busy firehouse, that you learn something. But I'll be honest, there's multiple things like what you just explained there. Even as a firefighter, we go back firehouse, we didn't learn anything except it was good to get it out and get back to our recliners, So there's times like that where it's instead of more of learning from it, it's almost a proof of that, hey, what we're doing is working. And that's a total blessing. It's a glorious thing, in my opinion.
For sure. Well, we are almost out of time. It's been a quick hour for sure, but I'll toss it over to Mike, and you can comment and wrap us up.
Yeah, so I wanted to kind of tack a different direction slightly here, and I think it's certainly very prevalent in both the title and the theme of your book, but really just calling out attention to the fact that, sometimes the rescuers need to be rescued. And as rescuers, as people that are choosing to try to help people, that we have to recognize sometimes that we need help. And that we've talked about it on the show before, the idea that sometimes it might just be better for us to sit in service that day, not serve. You as a LT, I'm sure you get it from there as well. There's days, maybe it wasn't the best day for you to lead that team. And we have to recognize that on our side as well. So James wrote a book, Coming Back. And I think the stress and the emotional toll and the different amount of weight that things like today with the protests and other things can build up on people, that pressure, that anxiety, that anticipation, that it's just not healthy if you don't deal with it appropriately. And the idea that sometimes you need more. So the encouragement there, I'd say, is that folks have a mentor, another person that can have your back, but not just physically as part of the team, but to have your back from a standpoint of, are they checking on you? Are they making sure that you're good and you're not just constantly, proverbially running into the fire?
And that falls into a huge thing called discipleship, right? To have someone discipling us, to feed into our lives, to pour into our lives, to recognize things in our lives, to, mentor us in a biblically sound way, discipleship. And you nailed it. There are times when I go to church and I need to be filled up because I'm pouring into people as we should. But there's a reason Sunday mornings or whenever your church time is because we are pouring into people at our local church, but we're also getting fed too. And so I really appreciate you speaking into that, because there's some days I just need to rest in the Lord's love and strength and comfort and step away from mine.
Absolutely. We're constantly, we can pray for that peace, that true peace, to have a good Sunday, that nothing happens. But again, the idea is that God's peace is not the absence of something happening. It's the fact that God's, again, in the boat. God is with us. That peace is there because he's in it through it.
Right. No, it's good wisdom there. I really appreciate that.
For sure. Well, we have to wrap up. I would love to jump into more questions for Jason and talk about upcoming projects and and all sorts of stuff. But I would recommend picking up a copy of it so you can kind of see it there. It's called The Rescuer, and it's available on Amazon in multiple formats, but just a really encouraging, great read. And we definitely appreciate you joining us on the broadcast today, Jason. It means a lot.
Oh man, it's a blessing to be there. And the other place folks can go it's an easy spot is rescuerbook.com. And it's just a simple spot that they put together there too. Yes. And then, if they also want to hear some more chatter and stuff about what I'm all about, we also do a podcast that we just switched the name on now, and it's called Faith Forged in Fire. So it kind of talk two firefighters, one of who's a pastor. We talk about just biblically sound stuff, plus the cool things we learned from the fire service. So you can always check us out on there too if you want to see it. It's just called Faith Forged in Fire, and that's a pretty fun spot to hear what we have to say.
Sure. Cool. And what we'll do when we upload this to YouTube and our podcast links, we'll go ahead and put a link in there for that, so you can check out his podcast and listen as well. But again, thank you so much for joining us. As always, you can reach out to us if we can help you with your church ministry. You can reach out through our website at churchsafetyguys.com or through our church security app, and we're happy to help you as much as we can. And other than that, Mike, did you want to add anything?
No, it's good. I think it's great. It was good having you on, Jason. A lot there. I look forward to reading the book. Thank you for your years of service that you put in there. Thank you for what you're doing now and carrying that message to others that people need to hear.
Oh, and likewise, I appreciate everything that you two are doing. And thank you so much for having me on this evening. It was really awesome.
Sounds good. All right. Well, we will talk to you actually in 2 weeks. We're going to take this next week off, which, it seems kind of crazy. We've got our conference down in Florida going on, but it's funny that it's this fast. Like it's come up this fast. I'm nervous, but anyhow, reach out to us if we can help you or your church in any way. We would be honored to, and we will talk to you next time. So take care. Have a great week, and God bless.
Thank you for joining the Church Safety and Security broadcast with the Church Safety Guys, sponsored by Checker. We hope that you found it informative, and we appreciate your feedback. Be sure to share our broadcast with your teams. Join the discussion online, and for other great resources, download the Church Security app or visit our website at churchsafetyguys.com. Remember, keep a servant's heart, a mindset of ministry, and Semper Disciplina. Always be training. Have a blessed week.